In compliance with a custom as old as the government itself, I appear before you to address you briefly and to take in your presence the oath prescribed by the Constitution of the United States to be taken by the President before he enters on the execution of this office. I do not consider it necessary at present for me to discuss those matters of administration about which there is no special anxiety or excitement. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension.
Obviously, the South thought differently. And this was why the Civil War occurred from 1861 to 1865. There were many things that both directly and indirectly contributed to the start of the Civil War. The likelihood of secession was greatly increased by the coexistence of a slave-owning South and an increasingly anti-slavery North. Lincoln did not propose federal laws against slavery where it already existed, but he had, in his 1858 House Divided speech, expressed a desire to arrest the further spread of it, and place it where the public mind shall rest in the belief that it is in the course of ultimate extinction. Much of the political battle in the 1850s focused on the issue of slavery in the newly created territories, many of which were likely to become free soil states, increasing the Southern movement towards secession. Both North and South assumed that if slavery could not expand, it would wither and die. In the late 1850s, the Northern and Southern political parties came to a head. Sectional disagreements over the morality of slavery, the scope of democracy, and the economic merits of free labor versus slave plantations caused the Whig and Know-Nothing parties to collapse, and new ones to arise, such as the Free Soil Party in 1848, the Republicans in 1854, and the Constitutional Union in 1860. Other factors leading up to the war include modernization in the rapidly industrializing North and sectionalism caused by the growth of slavery in the Deep South. However, even under these factors lay the problem of slavery. The vastly popular anti-slavery novel Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe greatly increased Northern opposition to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Conditions continued to worsen, and in Congress, arguments over slavery became violent when Representative Preston Brooks of South Carolina attacked radical Republican Senator Charles Sumner with a gold-knobbed cane after Sumner's Crime Against Kansas speech. Slavery even became entangled in the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad due to the Bleeding Kansas controversy. The Dred Scott decision of 1857, John Brown's raid in 1859, and the split in the Democratic Party in 1860 were highly influential in the developing relationship between the North and South. However, it was the election of Lincoln in 1860 that was the final trigger for secession. Southerners thought that he would stop the expansion of slavery, perhaps eliminating it altogether, and saw themselves slowly becoming a minority in the House of Representatives, Senate, and Electoral College compared to the growing North. The Southern states slowly began to secede, eventually creating their own large state, which they called the Confederacy, and Lincoln knew something must be done to preserve the Union. However, he did not want bloodshed. He wanted a compromise and peace. The Civil War had started. The first shots in the war were at Fort Sumter in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina at 4:30 a.m. on April 12, 1861. Lincoln had sent food and other supplies to the soldiers in the fort. Although there were no munitions sent, the newly formed Confederates bombarded and took over the fort, signaling the beginning of a long and bloody war.
Hey, you! What do you think you're doing there?
I'm bringing food and firewood to Fort Sumter.
He's bringing ammunition!
It's food and firewood!
He's bringing ammunition! Fire
but
on
it's
him!
Food! Oh, it's...
Fire! Raid Fort Sumter! Kill the bastard!
The First Battle of Bull Run in 1861 was the premier major battle of the Civil War. Meant to be a quick end to the war, many people gathered on the hillsides to have picnics and watch the spectacle.
Oh my god, a battle!
However, they were soon astonished at what they saw and fled.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
The Confederate troops had gotten reinforcements and taken good positions in the earthy terrain. They quickly overcame the Union forces, and the Union Army fled.
Retreat! Retreat!
The Battle of Shiloh occurred from April 6th to the 7th in 1862. Ulysses S. Grant led the Union forces, and Beauregard led the majority of the Southern forces. Grant was ambushed in order to prevent his unit from joining with Buell's, another Union officer. Although originally the South appeared to have the advantage, the North soon had the upper hand when Buell himself came with reinforcements.
Run away!
They forced the Confederates to retreat, thus enabling the Union access to northern Mississippi.
Our flag is proudly floating on the land and on the main. Shout, shout the battle cry of freedom.
The Battle of Antietam occurred in Washington County in September 1862, where over 23,000 men died in a single day. Although outnumbered 2-1, Lee committed his entire force, while McClellan sent in less than 3/4 of his army, enabling Lee to fight the Federals to a standstill. During the night, both armies consolidated their lines, and in spite of crippling casualties, Lee continued to skirmish with McClellan. McClellan made a mistake when he did not renew his attack, and after dark, Lee ordered the battered Army of Northern Virginia to withdraw across the Potomac into the Shenandoah Valley. The Battle of Gettysburg was one of the most influential battles and one of the bloodiest. From July 1st to the 3rd in 1863, over 51,000 soldiers died. Lee tried to surround the Union forces by striking at a number of positions at the same time. However, the Confederates were driven back. In a desperate move called Pickett's Charge, Lee sent his forces in order to try to pierce the Union line. However, he failed and received huge losses. He withdrew to the Potomac quickly afterwards, and his train of wounded stretched more than 14 miles.
With the cross we will rally around, the bonny flag will rally once again. Shout, shout the battle cry.
In May and June of 1863, Major General Ulysses S. Grant's armies converged on Vicksburg, invading the city and entrapping the Confederate Army under Lieutenant General John Pemberton.
Shout, shout
Water. Please give me some water. Oh.
their motto is
They starved us out.
the time.
We had no ammunition, and they came from nowhere, like those damn northern bastards. There were so many of them. We were just overwhelmed.
On July 4th, Vicksburg surrendered after a prolonged siege operations. This was the culmination of one of the most brilliant military campaigns of the war. With the loss of Pemberton's army and his vital stronghold on the Mississippi, the Confederacy was effectively split in half.
General Lee, the Union forces have divided us into two. What do we do?
We shall make a stand, son.
For the Confederacy!
Faced with defeat, the Confederacy surrendered on April 9, 1865, at the Appomattox Courthouse. Now an 1,800-acre national park, this was where General Robert E. Lee met with Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant to hand over the final writ of surrender. The Civil War was over.
Boom, dicky, 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 boom, dicky,
Free slaves? This is madness!
Madness? This is the Union!